I feel like I always ask really the dumb questions, like the ones that I think nobody wants to know the answer to. And it's only me that is having this question. And so I'm almost
Can you
scared
give
to
me an
amplify
example?
on that.
Because I think I know what you mean, but I just want to confirm. Yeah.
Well, I can't think of an example on the spot, but I
Let me
will
give you an
say,
example.
sure.
So, what you just asked me about that, um, okay, what should I do if I'm still going through it, or like, you know what I mean? If I haven't achieved something, like, how can I tell a story? Like, to me, the dumb questions are usually the follow up questions. Do you understand what I mean? So, for example, like, I also told this story, this example before, but when I used to go into a meeting, right? Um, and we're selling technology product, we're selling like app development or something like that, and then there will be some. Okay, this is a typical tech uh, sales meeting. So there'll be some tech salesperson that's talking about, oh yeah, and then we're going to be using a MVC framework, and that's what, like, Ruby on Rails, and these, like, they bring up some popular technologies, and that's why this is so popular or something like that. Or like right now, JavaScript is like the hot thing, so they might bring in something like, oh yeah, we're going to use a JavaScript framework, and because it's faster and blah blah blah,
Hmm.
right? And then everybody in the room is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, the first question for them would have been like, oh, what framework are you using and why? And they'd be like,
I
oh, we're
know where
using
you're
an
going
MVC.
with this. Yeah.
And then everyone's like, okay, yeah, that's good. But then usually the CEO that's in the meeting will ask the dumb question. They'll be like, oh, I don't want to sound dumb, but why is it better?
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Yes.
And then now that
100%.
person is forced to explain it, right? And actually, the reason why CEOs ask that is because they're naturally curious, because they didn't understand it. They didn't understand it the way a child would understand it. So they actually want to know. It's a selfish thing, right? But then usually in that scenario, none of the other person that says, "Oh, I got it," even they had the same question. They just didn't want to sound stupid, so that they didn't raise their hand to ask, right? Because if I were to go and ask them, because since you guys didn't have those questions, what's your answer? They still can't answer me. Like, I feel like that's why, like, Einstein said, like, if you can't teach it to a 6-year-old, you don't really know it well yourself. So then I was like that. I was that guy. I was that guy in the room that would ask that stupid
Yes.
question that tech salespeople hate, right? Because now he has to explain it to me, and he doesn't know how to, right? But because of that, I actually learned how to explain these more clearly. So when I was in that meeting, I would actually be like, okay, the way an MVC framework works is because MVC stands for model view controller. And then model is where we store all of your company data, meaning all your employees, all the products you sell. And they're all just in its own object, right? And then within this model, there's already, we embed all the rules in there already.
Hmm.
For example, if they buy this with this, they get discount, and but whatever that is, right? And then view is where what you see on screen, right? All it is just like a skeleton of the thing that you see on your screen. Like if you're in an e-commerce store, like the list of the products or the checkout page or whatever it is, right? And then controller is where we put in all the. Oh, actually, sorry. Model has some um, basic criteria, basic rules, right? Like, for example, if you can't buy more than if one customer can't buy more than 12 or something like that, that's embedded into the model, because that's a rule that cannot be broken, right? Controller is where like all the other logics happen. So, for example, if somebody from the view says, okay, I want to find all the products that are under $50, right? Then view just shows that, somebody selects $50 and hits submit, and now it goes to the controller, and the controller will understand what that logic is, and then we'll connect to the view model, and then the model will take care of all the basic rules so that you know that it'll never ignore those business rules, and then it comes back to the controller. And when you code it like this, as your business grows and you add more business logics and things like that, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be easier to keep track of things, and less bugs are gonna happen, and it's also easier to do development because when we just need to change the logic, we just do it here or something like that, right? So and then somebody's gonna be like, okay, then why can't we do it like this? Blah, blah, blah. Like, do you understand what I mean? But the best questions are usually the questions that like that annoying child asks. But why? But why do we have to do it like that, right? But usually when you ask that, that's the thing that everybody else was curious about too. They just didn't have the balls to ask it.
But see, in my situation, I always get that look of, weren't you paying attention? Or do we really have to go all the way back? And so, like,
well, it's because I think it comes back to your original, what you said in the beginning of the show, which is, I think most people are okay with just accepting that answer that somebody says, and now that's just how it is, right?
yeah.
Whereas in like, maybe you and I are different. Like, I'm not willing to just accept that. Why is it okay? Then why is the thing that you said is like that, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's, and I guess that's kind of what makes us different. And it's actually used the reason why I come up with so many content that makes people say I never thought of it that way, because usually, okay, here's a perfect example, right? I think we talked about I talked about how Steve Jobs, like when I'm pretty sure I told you this story before, but I'll say for the audience, when they built the Macintosh, they think that the real innovation of Macintosh came from the graphical user interface, the mouse, and all of that. But all of that was already built in the previous GUI computer, which was called the Lisa. The only difference was the Lisa was $12,000, and Steve Jobs wanted to make something that's under $2,000, right? So he went through the entire manufacturing process, and he saw how it's done. He's like, oh yeah, so why do we buy all the materials up front? Because you're saying that if we buy it now, next year it might get cheaper, and depending on that, we might lose money. Or also, why do we have to do this first, and then before we bring it to here, and then why can't we just do this part here, or why can't this person just do this? Like, he asked all these dumb questions.
Yeah.
And he didn't know anything about manufacturing, and the answer that he kept getting from the experts of the manufacturing process was like, that's just the way it's always been done. Do you understand what I mean? So most people do things just because it's the way it's been done, without critically really thinking and asking, why is that the way it's like? Why can't we find a better way to do that, or something like that? And that's kind of like how cars were made, right? Like, when Tesla first started cars, every car, they manufactured these standard parts, right? There's a standard parts that every car uses, and there's a manufacturing company that makes those parts. And whether you're Toyota or like Mercedes or whatever it is, they buy these parts from this one company, and these are like the screws or certain parts that goes inside the engine, the cylinders or whatever it is. They have to use those parts, right? And then Elon Musk said, "Why do we have to do that? Like, it's because, and that's because it's the cheapest way, right? Because these parts are already made, so we can just use it." But then he thought about it, and he's like, "No, but because now we have to pay this another company to make those parts for us. Right. That's going to cost more, and then now we have to spend more money assembling those things into this, right? That's how assembly lines work." But so eventually, like, he just kind of stretched that whole thing, and he came up with the idea of GigaPress, where instead of like assembling those parts, this kind of machine just like goes boom, and then it just prints that. It basically molds that the huge frame of the car right?
Mm-hmm.
Without having to use little pieces. So something like that. And that's the reason why Tesla is the only electric car manufacturer that has like a $9,000 profit margin, where I think every other car has like $1,000 profit margin or something like that, right?
Mm.
But that's because he saw how it's being done, and everybody was saying that's just how it's always been done, and then he found a better way.